Alright, in today's video, we are going to be looking on past the 2020 election and onto the 2024 election. Today's video is going to be about Democrats who may end up running for the presidency in 2024. I will have another video similar to this one about Republicans who I think could run for the presidency in 2024. Alright, we're going to start out with members of the U.S. House. And for this section, we only have two. First, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who identifies mainly as a progressive or a democratic socialist. In 2018, she was elected as the youngest congressperson, except it looks like a gentleman from North Carolina will break her record and will be elected at 25 years old. Ocasio-Cortez was elected, I believe, at 29 years old. And she is from her district is in the Bronx in New York. Next is one other thing I should add about Ocasio-Cortez is her speech firing back at Ted Yoho for his inappropriate comments towards her has gained her some more national traction. Next is Val Demings, who's a congressperson representing Orlando, Florida. She represents, I think, the downtown area and some of the suburbs. She's the former police chief of Orlando and the first African-American female to hold that position. And she's a moderate. She's also, as of today, in the contention to be Biden's vice president. Next, moving on to senators. Two Tammys, both from the Midwest, and both being considered to be Joe Biden's vice president at the moment. First is Tammy Baldwin, who's a senator from Wisconsin. She used to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives, and when she was in the House of Representatives, she was the first openly LGBTQ congressperson, and she has somewhat liberal views. Next is Tammy Duckworth, who is a senator from Illinois. She is an Iraq War veteran, also a Biden VP candidate, and she has relatively moderate views. Two other Midwesterners are Amy Klobuchar, who ran unsuccessfully in 2020, and there was some buzz about her maybe being nominated as Biden's vice president. However, she declined and said she did not want to be considered. She is currently a senator from Minnesota, and she has moderate views. Another Midwesterner is Sherrod Brown, who is a U.S. Senator from Ohio, and he has fairly liberal views. Three Northeasterners. I put Joe Kennedy III in this category because I think that he will definitely win the Massachusetts Senate election. He is a young congressperson from Massachusetts. He, a couple years back, I believe, gave the Democratic response to President Trump's State of the Union. His last name is Kennedy. He comes from one of the political dynasties in this nation, so he has a ton of name recognition, and he has fairly moderate views. Next is Kirsten Gillibrand, who's a senator from New York, and most people forget, but she did run a 2020 presidential campaign, but she ran unsuccessfully and dropped out pretty early. She is very liberal or a democratic socialist. Next is Cory Booker, who is a senator from New Jersey. He ran a strong but unsuccessful campaign for the presidency in 2020, and he also has very liberal views. Now, senators from the West. First, we have Kyrsten Sinema, who is a senator from Arizona. She used to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives and is currently in her first term. She is very, very moderate, and some would even consider her a conservative Democrat. She is one of these senators who will definitely reach across the aisle and will vote with the Republicans on some occasions. Next is Michael Bennet, who is a senator from Colorado, who ran an unsuccessful 2020 presidential campaign. He is also a moderate. Next is Kamala Harris, who is a senator from my home state of California. She appears to be the front runner when it comes to Biden's VP speculation. And she ran a very strong but unsuccessful campaign for the 2020 presidency, and she has very liberal views. Moving on to governors. First, we have three that I'm dubbing the COVID champions for now. Definitely COVID champion is Andrew Cuomo, who really got his state's cases under control. He's the governor in New York. He has very liberal views. Next is Gretchen Whitmer, who is the governor of Michigan, who was praised for her for the measures she took to prevent COVID-19 spread early in March and April. She is also being considered for the vice presidency for Joe Biden. She has moderate views. Next is Gavin Newsom, who had a great early response to COVID-19. However, cases in the state of California have skyrocketed in recent weeks, and he has fairly liberal views. Next are two governors and one former governor from the Rockies who are both running for Senate. First is John Hickenlooper, who is the former Colorado governor. He had a failed 2020 presidential campaign. He dropped out very early. He is currently running for Senate in Colorado against incumbent Republican Cory Gardner. This is one of the seats that is more likely that the Democrats will flip from the Republicans. He has fairly moderate views. Next is Steve Bullock, who is the governor of Montana. Yes, Montana has a Democratic governor. They also have a Democratic senator. And they could have, if Steve Bullock is to defeat incumbent Senator Steve Daines, two Democratic senators. He had a failed 2020 presidential run, and he has fairly moderate views. Three others who could run. First, Michelle Lujan Grisham, who's the governor of New Mexico and a candidate for Biden's vice president, who has moderate views. Next is Jay Inslee, the current governor of Washington, who ran a single-issue campaign around climate change in 2020, who has very liberal views. And Andy Beshear, who is the current governor of Kentucky, who ran and won in that surprising election victory for the Democrats a little while back, and he has fairly moderate views. Other politicians. First is Pete Buttigieg, who is the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and ran a very, very strong but failed 2020 presidential campaign, winning the Iowa caucus, coming and finishing strong in both New Hampshire and Nevada, and he has fairly moderate views. Julian Castro, who's the former mayor of San Antonio, Texas, and the former Housing and Urban Development Secretary under Obama. He also ran a failed 2020 presidential campaign, and he has fairly liberal views. Next is Stacey Abrams, who's the former minority leader in the Georgia State House, who ran a failed 2018 gubernatorial campaign against now governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp. She came very close, the closest that Democrats have come to winning in Georgia in a while. She could potentially be Biden's vice president in this election. She has fairly moderate views. Non-politicians, and I have two of them. First, Michelle Obama, very notable. She is the former First Lady, and she's from the state of Illinois. I'm not going to speculate about her political views. I'm not going to say that her views are going to be exactly as her husband's, because I think it's unfair to assume that she and her husband would have the same views. Next is Oprah Winfrey, former TV host, a lot of name recognition, and she is originally from Mississippi. All right, these are some politicians and two non-politicians that I think could run for the presidency in 2024. I think that unlike in 2020 and 2016, where we kind of had big fields on either side, in 2016, there were a lot of Republicans running for the presidency, and in 2020, we had a lot of Democrats running for the presidency. I think despite the outcome of the 2020 election, we'll have big fields on both sides. All right, that is all for this video, and a reminder to like and subscribe and turn on notifications. And I will have which Republicans I think could run for the presidency in 2024 video coming out very shortly. All right, that is all.